Hello, Rivers here again. I'm going to tell you over time a bunch of stories from when I served as a volunteer for 3 years out at Salt Lake County Metro Jail. Let's call them Tales from the Jail, okay? But I want to tell you about one in particular that is pretty good, pretty funny. So let me begin by telling you a couple of things that I've learned over my life. If a man offers his hand, you shake it. Look a person square in the eyes and give him a firm handshake. Make it a manly handshake, no dead fish handshakes. I learned this from my dad. It's part of the unwritten code of the West. Giving someone a handshake is almost like a reflex action for me. I don't put a whole lot of thought into whether or not I should shake a hand that is extended to me. I once found myself in a boatload of trouble with an officer of the law for giving a man a handshake. What? Come again? A handshake? Is it against the law to shake someone's hand? Let me explain. I volunteered at the Salt Lake County Metro Jail. I call it County Metro. Every Sunday, I spend 3 hours out at County Metro going cell to cell in maximum security and teaching a Sunday school class or two. I love serving out at County Metro. I have come to love the inmates that I met and that I teach every Sunday out at County Metro. We teach our Sunday school classes in the medium and minimum security pods. About 30 feet from the raised guard station in each pod is what is called the multi-purpose room. We teach our classes in that room. The officer in the pod has a direct view into this room. The officer controls access to the multi-purpose room. The room has a whiteboard along one wall, a bunch of stackable plastic chairs, and 2 or 3 long, skinny tables. The room can hold up to, say, 15 or so inmates. As I stand at the whiteboard facing the inmates and look to my right, I can always see the officer. At any time, I can motion to the officer for help, or I can hit a nearby button on a wall and help is on its way. I will tell you that I have never needed help for the 3 years that I served there. I have never felt that I was in any kind of personal danger at County Metro. As volunteers at County Metro, we are expected to comply with a number of rules and regulations. I can understand almost all of these rules and regulations, but I do have a problem with one of the rules. We are not to have any physical contact with the inmates, none. Specifically, I am not to shake the hands of an inmate. I have tried to understand this rule. I have struggled with this rule. I suppose the rule is for our protection, I guess. But let me tell you something, a lot of the inmates in my class are in a desperate need for a hug or a handshake. Many of the inmates are totally without hope. You can see it in their eyes. It almost seems like cruel and unusual punishment, as we lawyers like to say, not to shake their hand or to give them a hug. Almost all of the inmates treat us like $1 million. They don't treat the guards like $1 million. Most of the correctional officers, they don't like being called guards, are kindly disposed to us volunteers, but some are not. One Sunday, I was teaching a Sunday school class in medium security. It was a good class. The sermon du jour was anger. Almost all of the inmates at County Metro are incarcerated for problems stemming from drug and alcohol abuse. I would hazard a guess that many, if not all of the inmates, have impulsively done things in anger while in the fog of drugs and alcohol, which has landed them in serious legal trouble. I love the book of James in the New Testament. I shared a couple of verses from the book of James with the inmates is we talked about the importance of controlling our anger. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. I asked the inmates how many of them have gotten into trouble by losing their tempers. All hands immediately shot up in the air. We then talked about how important it is to bridle or to control our tongue and what it means to bridle or control our tongue. James wrote, "Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. A tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison." We all need help to control our temper. So, back to the class. It was turning out to be a pretty nice class. The inmates were engaged and were making some really good comments. Making my final point about anger, I told the inmates, sometime we just have to bite our tongue when we feel like we're going to lose our temper. Immediately after I said this, I stuck my tongue out like this and acted as if I were biting down really hard on my tongue. There were a few chuckles, so it looked like this. As the inmates shuffled out of the multi-purpose room after the class, they expressed to me their thanks for my coming to teach them. One of the inmates, who seemed particularly engaged during the lesson, smiled at me and stuck out his hand for me to shake. Without thinking, I shook it. Then all heck broke loose. The officer in charge, a big, burly, bruising sort of fellow, screamed at me at the top of his lungs from his guard station into the multi-purpose room, "Did I see you shake hands with a prisoner?" I was busted. I felt ashamed. I knew I had just violated the rule against shaking hands with a prisoner. I knew I was in trouble, and I knew the prisoner who shook hands with me was also in trouble. Dramatically, the burly and brawny correction officer came booming into the multi-purpose room, snapping on a pair of rubber gloves dramatically as he entered the room. "You cannot touch the prisoners," he yelled at me. He continued his tirade in a very loud voice. "I can have you kicked out of the volunteer program." He could. He was even angrier at the inmate who shook hands with me and a couple of the other inmates who just happened to be near that inmate. He coarsely ordered 3 of the inmates out of the room and told them to stand with their backs against the window to the room as he continued to light into me. One of my core competencies, maybe even a superpower, that I have is that I'm really good at saying I'm sorry. It's kind of a weak sauce superpower, but it's not bad. And I guess the reason why I'm good at saying I'm sorry is because I screw up a lot. But I am very talented at calming troubled waters and not losing my temper. I told the guard that I was sorry and I wouldn't let it happen again. The guard was really up in my grill. He was violating my space bubble. He wasn't touching me, but he was coming pretty close. I must tell you that the officer's overreaction to my infraction was actually starting to give me the giggles, which I sorely needed to suppress. One of the last things the guard screamed at me was, "The only time I touch the inmates is when I'm hurting them." Whoa. Quite a startling confession. In the midst of being harangued by the guard, I began to feel sorry for the inmate that I had just shaken hands with. His back was resting against the back of the window. The guard had his back to the inmates as he was reading me the riot act. I glanced over the officer's shoulder at the inmate. The inmate must have felt me looking at him. He turned around and with a huge smile on his face, stuck out his tongue and acted like he was biting it really hard. The timing was impeccable. The guard did not notice what the inmate did. I almost burst out laughing. I did not hear anything else the guard was telling me. Sometimes you just have to bite your tongue. And that's it.